So the Conservancy works in every state in the United States and globally. We work in 30 different countries around the globe, and really that allows us to really have a living laboratory of the work and test different strategies, conservation strategies around the world and locally, and also disseminate information around a very broad network. So the Conservancy has a wealth of scientists, conservation experts, policy experts, and practitioners working on the ground in places, local places, and communities. We recognize the importance of telling true and compelling stories about what it means for the climate to be changing rapidly and how people are adapting and communities are adapting and planning for this new future. So on behalf of the Conservancy, I wanted to thank you for taking the time to be in this seminar and also write about and think about this important issue, and also for the University of Rhode Island, Metcalf Institute, and the Seattle Times for helping put this together. So thank you. So here in Washington, we are working in 3 major regions. The Washington coast, where we are protecting and restoring forests, rivers, and the marine environment, and salmon that depend on them. Cleaning up Puget Sound and waters and helping Puget Sound floodplains be resilient in the face of a changing climate. And lastly, we're focusing on the East Cascades region. We're protecting, connecting, and restoring the drier forests of the Central Cascades in eastern Washington. The Conservancy is known for protecting biodiversity, saving the last great places, buying land, or conservation easements and stewarding them. So this is a conservation easement in the East Cascades that has the most eastern or northern distribution of Oregon white oak in east of the Cascades. While these places are important and purchasing land continues to be an important conservation strategy for the Nature Conservancy, we have to think differently and we have to think bigger over longer periods of time if you're going to be effective in a changing climate. Protecting land only works in the context, the role of ecological processes in that place, such as fire. Does it enhance or does it degrade the values that we are trying to protect over time? If it doesn't do us any good to hold a small forest preserve, if that habitat is lost in a changing climate or destroyed in a megafire. Dave Peterson and others today have done a great job in describing the grave challenges of our interior forests as a result to climate change. I would like to talk today more about what that means for us as a society and how we manage our forests. We have to work at a much larger scale across larger landscapes. We have to work more holistically, and we have to incorporate processes like fire, insects infestations, and disease, and species migration in changing climate to meet the needs of both people and nature. And this also means that we need to manage forests for all its values that it holds. Cold, clean water, clean air, salmon, wildlife habitat, recreation, carbon storage, traditional forest products, and the economic value for the communities that are dependent on these forests. And we must recognize that fire is always going to be a part of these systems and these landscapes. That we know that fire has shaped these forests and plants and animals that have depended on them for millennia. With that in mind, we can learn how fire has shaped these forests historically and an eye towards the future in a changing climate. The reality is we're going to have fire in these interior forests. The question is how much, and can we dictate the terms so that they can be healthier for results for both people, water, and wildlife. So now the Nature Conservancy, given this context, is looking at how do we look at the work we do in a different way. And so now we're advocating for a new approach, and we're working with many partners, including tribes, federal agencies, state agencies, and industry. This approach can be summed up as protect, connect, and restore. In the Central Cascades, the forests, we have a checkerboard of ownership in private lands owned by timber companies interspersed with federal and state lands. Many timber companies are putting those lands on the private market. That checkerboard, especially if it gets developed for recreational homes, makes it difficult to manage forests holistically. The Conservancy has been working with partners like the Department of Fish and Wildlife, the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, and to acquire significant pieces of checkerboard that have been privately owned and bring them into public ownership. By connecting these large landscapes north to south from high elevation to low elevation, we encompass a wide range of environments and give species routes to migrate and adapt in a changing climate. And with humans as visitors and not residents, we can manage fire more safely for less cost and for the benefit of forests into the future. But our work isn't done if we stop at the protection stage. Equally important is ecological restoration, designed to make the forest more resilient to a warmer and drier climate and protect water flows, aquatic habitat. We should learn from the past, but restoration has to look forward, not try to recreate earlier conditions and address existing problems, but plan for also future conditions. So for example, we know that from Smokey the Bear era, that the fire-thin dry forests. We have more trees now, albeit they're smaller trees and less fire resistant. And in a future climate, we predict there will be more drought stress on these forests and more fire in these forests. Therefore, looking back and also looking forward, we need to learn that in this forest, we need to do more controlled burning and more thinning to reduce the fuel load and enable us to manage fire to conserve forest values. In water management, in dry forests, and in Ingrid and others, but we are really looking closely at roads and culverts on the Okanagan-Wenatchee forest to understand how they'll function and conditions change. Thanks to the work of the Climate Impacts Group, the work that Ingrid presented earlier today, and other work, and Dave Peterson for the North Cascade Adaptation Partnership, we're learning that having roads, existing road systems are a big issue moving forward, but that especially that roads in the wrong places turns out to be one of the biggest problems we immediately face in our forests as hydrologic flows change with a changing climate. And this, we need to think about how we manage that road system in bigger landscapes and what kind of choices we're making when we're doing restoration. New initiatives in Washington are bringing stakeholders together. For example, the Washington Prescribed Fire Council is getting up and running to bring a diverse set of stakeholders, encourage more controlled burning safely in the landscape. It sounds like a paradox. We're worried about more fire, so we want to create more fire, but it's absolutely necessary and part of the solution moving forward in these forests. By doing controlled burns in carefully chosen locations and carefully chosen conditions, we can set the stage to manage wildfire as it reduces costs for the benefit of people and nature. Along similar lines, knowing that there will be more fire in these forests and how human communities can better adapt, I've been working with others in one of 8 pilot projects across the United States to implement a new initiative, Fire Adapted Communities. It's designed to help community members better prepare before, during, and after wildfires to better live with and adapt to fire, as we know there will be more fire in these forests moving forward in these communities. There's also many forest collaboratives engaged across the West to finding ways to work together to address pressing issues of forest management and implement adaptation strategies. The Conservancy is invested in figuring out how to address needs of our forests. Our work here in Washington, Oregon, and Idaho are part of a national project, Restoring America's Forests, with demonstration sites across the country. One of the biggest problems in our country is facing right now is money to do all this work, and that was brought up earlier in the question session answer with Dave Peterson. So here's an example. In mid-August, the Forest Service announced that it had run out of money to fight fires and needed to start taking $600 million away from other crucial programs. These transfers result in less forest restoration, active management, landowner assistance, less recreational services, road maintenance, and lost jobs. In addition to all these consequences, the sad reality is that these transfers will also lead to long-term increase in fire risk and fire costs in these forests. We know that good restoration and forest fire management can actually reduce impacts and cost less than fighting these large megafires. This is the second straight year and seventh time since 2002 the Forest Service has exceeded firefighting dollars and been forced to look to other programs to make up the deficit. It doesn't make sense to kind of continue that type of policy. In addition, the state legislature, the Washington State Legislature, recognizes the larger forest health problem in these issues, and for the first time this year has dedicated some funding for restoration work on federal forest that are adjacent to state lands to help starting looking at larger landscapes and how we can approach the bigger problem and across multiple ownerships and across multiple policies. So in conclusion, really we must work together and we must work at a larger scale and we must allocate the necessary resources to adapt to a changing world. And that'll mean looking at innovative ways relative to thinking about how we fund natural resource management and this type of restoration as well as traditional. And I guess I'd just like to, a lot of the climate change science and discussions can be pretty gloom and doom, and I know those are hard stories to get traction on. And I feel like, and you know, I heard it from Oliver and others, that there are things we can start to act on. And so, you know, as a fourth generation Northwesterner and who has family that are rooted in ranching, farming, and mining, I know that people in really these systems and nature is very resilient. But as Dave said, there really are thresholds. And so we really do need to look at what are the things we can learn from the science and think about how we can adapt and change into the future. Thank you.